Introduce today's speaker. It is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Professor Carin Kreutzer, undergraduate student Melissa Shao. Professor Carin received her bachelor's degree in nutrition and dietetics from Cal State University, Fresno, and then completed a dietetic internship at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston. She received a master's degree in public health, health services management, and administration from the University of Washington, Seattle. She then completed a doctorate degree in urban education. She worked in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates as a clinical dietitian and directed maternal and child health nutrition for the New Mexico Department of Public Health. For over 20 years, she directed community education at the USC Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities at Children's Hospital, Los Angeles. Teaching responsibilities have included part-time nutrition courses at several universities in Southern California and since 2014 at the USC Leonard David School of Gerontology, where she is now teaching full-time. Melissa Shao is a second-year student in the Master of Science Coordinated Program in Nutrition and Health Span and Longevity at the USC Leonard Davis School of Gerontology, and she will be collaborating with Professor Carin Kreutzer in today's seminar, and she will also partake in the seminar. Now over to Professor Kreutzer.
Good. Yeah, thank you so much for the introduction. So we are focusing today on food and diet, and we're going to try to answer the question, does a perfect diet exist? And we're not doing 3 truths and a lie. We're going to be doing 3 truths throughout our presentation. Next slide. Just another picture of us, and then next slide. So we're going to start by asking you all a question, and that is, if you can look at this list of foods, can you put in the chat how many of these foods you have eaten this week? So Sunday through Thursday. We got an 8, we got a 7. Wow, you guys do well. So these are foods that have superpowers and lots of evidence behind all of them. We can look at any of these and talk about bioactive components. We can talk about antioxidants, polyphenols, et cetera, et cetera. They are foods that we should have in our diet every day. And hopefully by the end of the presentation, these are foods that you'll be thinking about if you don't have them in your diet, maybe adding. Next slide. So the big question that we will attempt to answer, is there a perfect diet? Next slide. And before we can really think about that, one of the truths that we have to really look at, each of us ourselves, in order to answer that question is, what is our ancestry? What does our family history of our ancestors tell us about our disease risk, about our genetics? And I always tell students, ask your family members, if no one's ever talked about it, find out what your great aunt and your great grandfather, what did they die from? What's the history in your family? What are diseases that you need to be aware of? Culture is a big part of that. It influences our genetics and foods that maybe taste good to us, foods that maybe we can't eat. We will also talk about guidelines that we have available to us through lots of research that is put together by CDC, National Academies of Science, that looks at nutrient needs by age group. So vitamins and minerals, macronutrients, micronutrients. Other important thing that we need to really think about as we're thinking about diet, what's your height and weight? Is your BMI within a normal range? I'm not a big fan of BMI by itself. I think we need to look at other factors because all of us have different body sizes, but certainly looking at that. Again, for for us what food is available in LA. We pretty much have a lot that's available, but maybe you're on a budget and food availability, you've got to use coupons or shop carefully. And then the last is food preferences that go into what would be your perfect diet. Next slide. So a few examples of some of the genetics and ancestry and how each of us is unique in how we not only utilize nutrients, but how nutrients taste to us. I don't know if in your academic careers you have been able to do the test strips for PTC or phenylthiocarbamide. I do that with students to get them thinking about how we're each different with being able to taste bitter. And the TAS2R38 is a genetic single nucleotide polymorphism that deals with the taste of bitter. And it's thought that that goes back thousands of years and protected our ancestors from eating things that weren't safe for them to eat. But you'd be surprised how different we each are with that. And research in that area has looked at children and their not being willing to eat foods like broccoli or other strong tasting vegetables. If you're a super taster, I've looked at it in terms of obesity and individuals that overeat with the notion that it may have to do with their ability to taste the foods that they're eating, and they're consuming more because they aren't a super taster and they don't taste a lot of certain substances. We know lactose intolerance goes back thousands of years, and those that are of Northern European ancestry, that was food for that area of the world, was cows and milk, and that genetics got passed down, that you don't see lactose intolerance in Northern European population. You see it in other countries where milk and being able to break down lactose into the simple sugars because of the enzyme, lactase enzyme not being present, definitely is genetic. We also, there's a lot of evidence looking at folate and one's ability to break down folic acid into the folate that the body can use. And that is a genetic condition labeled MTHFR. And we see higher rates of that in Hispanic, primarily those from Mexico, where they may need additional folic acid and foods that are high in folate during pregnancy to prevent neural tube defects. The population that I have interest in and have studied and have shared with students is the significant changes that happened to indigenous people as they were forced onto reservations and were given commodity foods from the US government, which were not their normal foods. They not only had those genetic shifts that were happening that their body wasn't ready for, but added to that stress, poor activity. And we see really high rates in indigenous people in obesity and diabetes, also alcoholism and kidney disease. But a lot of that is because we changed their environment, we changed their food, and it was too fast. It didn't give them the time they needed to be able to adjust. Next slide. So the last that I'm going to share, I want to talk just briefly about, and I labeled it the silent diseases. All of us in this room may at some point in our life die from hypertension, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, or cancer. Those are the top killers. I had my great-grandfather died of TB. He was 40. Nobody dies from TB. Very few people die from TB. All those chronic, the acute conditions that we now know how to treat, and we now have these silent diseases that are killing adults and older adults. And what they all have in common is that they develop quietly over time. They don't have signs or symptoms. Your blood sugar normal level is 100. Your blood sugar sugar could be in the 300 to 400 level for months, even years ongoing, and you may not have symptoms. You may be a little thirsty, you may urinate a little more often. It doesn't get picked up and it doesn't get treated early. And these conditions, if not taken care of early, are exacerbated, certainly in people that are obese or have a poor diet, stress in their life. And so diet for all of those conditions can be a significant contributor to preventing and controlling those diseases. The last point I'll make is, and this is one of the truths, is that while we may know that eating healthy is good for us, the actual ability to be able to change our lifestyle, change the foods that we're eating after a lifetime of having those habits, for many people is really difficult and may not happen. Even given knowing that they have the disease they have, making those changes can be tough. Next slide, and I'll turn it to you. Or no, I'm going to cover this slide. So guidelines that we have the Dietary Reference Intakes. I'm not going to go through all of these. I'll make a connection where you would find this information. Through the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, a committee of experts are brought together to define what are the vitamin, mineral, energy, macronutrient, dietary needs of different ages, life stages, etc. And DRIs came up with 5 different categories based on the information they have. The area that you would be familiar with that is that informs the information on a food label is the RDA. So the RDAs are meant to meet the needs of 97 to 98% of all adults. So the RDA is always going to be higher than maybe what you individually need for a certain vitamin or mineral so that everybody's covered. Those RDAs are the percent daily value that you see on a food label. Next slide. The other guidance that comes out every 5 years is the Dietary Guidelines for Americans, and they look at how people are doing health-wise, what our diet looks like, where do we need changes, where are people falling down in terms of eating a healthy diet. And these 5 were their recommendations for the 2025 guidelines. They're working right now on the 2030 guidelines and probably should come out later this year. And highlights of this is vegetables and fruit for cancer prevention, legumes and whole grains for, again, cancer, colon cancer, having more fiber in the diet, limiting red and processed meats and saturated fats. Average individual gets way more added sugars and sodium in their diet than what they should be having. So highlighting that, making people more aware. Next slide. So in summary, these 2 different pieces of information, DRIs, are used more by clinicians and give us actual numbers. The Dietary Guidelines for Americans really help us understand what foods we need to be eating more of or less of and where we're not doing so well. Next slide. These data come originally from the NHANES, which is the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey. And NHANES data, the researchers looked at what's called the Healthy Eating Index, and it looks at the Dietary Guidelines for Americans and how closely are different age groups meeting what the dietary guidelines are recommending, with 100 being the maximum total score that one could have. And you can see that the teenage group is doing the poorly in terms of meeting the dietary guidelines, and the youngest and the oldest groups are doing better than most. What's striking to me with this is that we're really only in the 60s. Why are we not up in the 80s or the 90s? And my experience in looking at literature and research, the big one is fruits and vegetables and consumption of red meats. We're not where we should be with fruit and vegetable intake. Next slide.
So we have all these wonderful guidelines and ideas about what to do and eat. So what do we think is preventing people from making these healthier choices that is recommended? What do you guys think? Habit,
Cost.
Cost, definitely. Alcohol, taste, yeah. And yeah, all great thoughts. Our environment definitely makes plays a big role in making choices. And first, let's talk about the power of food marketing, actually. Each year, these big companies spend over $14 billion just to convince us to buy these fast foods, these sugary drinks, and these high sodium snack foods. And it's not random, they're targeted, and mostly towards kids and low income communities where they have the biggest impact. And sadly, this advertising works. It shapes what we crave, what we think is normal to eat, and what even the kids ask their parents to buy and what they grow up with and what they're comfortable with. So that's why it's so important to be aware of how marketing is influencing our food choices and like just to be aware so they don't influence it without us even realizing it. Another one of the biggest challenges we face today is the processed food environment we live in. These processed foods are everywhere. They're cheap, they're convenient, they last forever on the shelf, and of course, they're carefully engineered to taste amazing. And of course, that combination makes it so hard to resist. But the problem is that they're usually really high in all these salts, the added sugars, the unhealthy fats, which in the dietary guidelines told us to stay away from. And this drives overconsumption. And they're not just tasty, scientists actually research this. They call them highly palatable and hedonic, which actually means they light up a certain reward system in our brain, and they're addictive, just like other substances. And so actually, that's why the dietary guideline actually recommends for the average adult to have no more than 50 grams of sugar per day. But most Americans eat way more than that. And if you see in the graphic, just how many tablespoons of sugars are in our everyday drinks that you see on the shelves, like sodas, sports drinks, energy drinks, which is a big one now. A lot of younger teenagers are really getting into sports energy drinks. And even these vitamin added waters, which is marketed to be technically healthy, actually have a lot of hidden sugars in it. And in many communities, especially in more rural areas and more low income neighborhoods, there's also less access to fresh and affordable produce. And these areas, which are called food deserts, are places where the nearest grocery store might be miles away, or where the only food option nearby are these convenience stores and fast foods. And it might be that even when there's a grocery store nearby, there's other barriers that get into the way. For example, like transportation. Not everyone might have a car, and public transit might not be good and on time, or like just lacking safe routes to travel. And another thing is time. Like people usually work long hours or multiple jobs. They often don't have the time or energy to really think about what their next meal or cooking a meal from scratch. And as a result of this environment, families rely on what's cheap and quick. And what that brings us back to what often is fast food or processed foods or convenience items. And not necessarily because they want to or like desire to, but it's because it's the most practical option. Looking at this chart, it's data again from NHANES, and it looks at processed foods consumed by the youth and adults as a percentage of their total calorie intake. And results show that for kids ages 1 to 18, they're eating around 62% of their calories from ultra processed foods. So more than half of their foods are ultra processed. And even more surprisingly, even adults aged 19 and older are getting more than half of their daily calories from these processed foods. So why might this be an issue? And this is because that there's a systematic review looking at the effect of these ultra processed foods and health outcomes. And what they found is that people, unsurprisingly, people who who eat more ultra-processed foods have higher risk of dying early, heart disease, mental health disorders, obesity, and type 2 diabetes. There's also growing evidence towards other digestive issues, cancers, even though we need more research there. And because of this, researchers are not just calling for more studies, but more public health strategies and policies that really help people eat fewer ultra-processed foods and just to let people be more aware of all the barriers we talked about, of the environment we talked about, and to create a better environment for people to eat better. And now, I did say a lot of barriers and a lot of negative things about what current food environment makes healthy eating difficult. And looking at dietary patterns from the global, around the globe and some of the more popular diets can give us a perspective on different approaches to nutrition. Maybe some are more effective than others. So we'll look at some bad, some good, some bad, and some ugly. So first, the traditional Asian diet pattern, and this is what many people across the East and Southeast Asia typically historically ate before Western influence. And the foundation is usually like rice or a grain as a staple, paired with like mostly vegetables at every meal, often lightly cooked, pickled, or fermented. And soy-based foods were a big part too, like tofu, miso, tempeh are a major protein source with fish and seafood to supplement. And beverages like green tea are common, which brings in extra antioxidants and the polyphenols we talked about earlier. And why does this matter? Well, because this eating pattern is actually high fiber, phytonutrients, and antioxidants and lower in saturated fats compared to the typical Western diet. And this combination is led to lower rates in heart disease and cancers, which is often why it's studied and modeled for healthy eating. Next, a super popular one, which is the traditional Mediterranean style one from countries like Greece, Italy, and Spain. And it's not just about the foods, actually. Although the diet is very plant-forward, rich in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and olive oils, which you're very familiar with, is like traditionally what we think of when we think of the Mediterranean diet. And it has moderate fish, poultry, and dairy, and even some red wine. And add like red processed meats, sugars, and refined grains are very limited. But also what makes this diet specifically unique is the way that people eat, actually. Meals are often shared with family and friends and eaten slowly with fresh homegrown fruits and vegetables when possible. This social and mindful aspect may play also an important role for our diet and health itself. And research shows that this lifestyle is linked to lower risk of heart disease, stroke, diabetes, and a longer lifespan. And emphasis on social eating and fresh foods may help explain why. And this is a Mediterranean pyramid, which is a visual that represents the recommended components of the Mediterranean lifestyle. At the base, you find the foods you eat most frequently, which is fruits, vegetables, legumes, grains, nuts, olive oil, and these should be the foundation of your diet and should be included at every meal with the Mediterranean diet. And then in the middle of the period, you have more of the foods you should eat in moderation, like fish, seafood, poultry, eggs, dairy. These provide like all the proteins and nutrients, but should not really be the main part of every meal. And top of the pyramid, foods to only really eat occasionally. We have red meat, processed foods, sweet. And surrounding the pyramid is all the unique factors we talked about, which is social eating, family, friends, enjoying meals slowly, which are integral to the health benefits of this diet. And essentially, this pyramid kind of just summarizes like not just what to eat, but like how often, and emphasizes that the lifestyle matters just as much as the food themselves. All right, next we can look at the vegetarian and vegan diet patterns. A vegetarian diet often is one that excludes meat, poultry, and fish, but may include dairy and eggs depending on what type of vegetarian you are. And a vegan diet is one that goes further, which excludes all animal products, including dairy, eggs, and even honey and butter. But both diets are plant forward and they, of course, focus on fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds. And why does this matter? Just because research shows that vegetarian and vegan diets are linked to lower risk of heart disease, high blood pressure, and type 2 diabetes, which is because these diets are often lower in saturated fats and cholesterols and higher in fiber, which is great for supporting the gut microbiome. And additionally, there is the environmental benefit, which plant-based diets typically use fewer natural resources and produce less greenhouse gases compared to diets high in animal products. Oh, Dr. Kate, this is for you.
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. The last diet we're going to talk about is the ketogenic diet, which is a high protein, high fat diet. And this is a diet that is typically very low in carbohydrates. It's a diet plan that came back to popularity because of its use in individuals with epilepsy or a seizure disorder. And there is evidence to show that seizure activity can be decreased, not for everyone, but for many individuals, it has been a great help with their seizures. The idea is that with a low carbohydrate intake, that you're going to shift your body into using fat for energy. And if we go back a number of years, we can look at the Atkins diet, which is where it started. And with that Atkins diet, again, it was high in fat, high in protein, low in carbohydrate. And this diet supports muscle maintenance because you're eating a higher protein intake. You're going to feel full because protein and fat take longer for our gut to be able to digest. And here's the secret about weight management. Most of the foods that we love and crave are carbohydrate foods, and people lose weight long term because they're cutting out so many foods that were part of their diet. It isn't nutritionally adequate because the carbohydrate restriction is so limited and not really sustainable for the long term. And just a note that additional initial weight loss, when you cut carbohydrate out, you need about 130 grams of carbs per day to feed your body and your brain. And when people cut that out, we store a small amount of carbohydrate in the form of glycogen. And when we deprive our body of carbohydrate, we use all those glycogen reserves in our muscles and our liver. And attached to the glycogen is water. So people that do this type of diet will be excited because of the initial weight loss. It is not fat loss, it is fluid loss. And the biggest challenge with this diet is that people often will go back to their old ways of eating once they decide to finish the diet, and often gain all of the weight back because they've not changed their diet habits. They followed a fad diet for a period of time. So it's popular, I know now, not always the healthiest diet. And 30 to 50 grams of carbohydrate, if we went with just 30 grams, 2 slices of bread is 30 grams of carbohydrate. 50 grams, you could have maybe a slice of bread, a half a cup of rice, and broccoli and carrots, no fruit. That would be your carbohydrates for the day. So it's pretty restrictive. Next slide.
Yeah, basically, to summarize the pros and cons of all the diets we just talked about, Asian diets are high in vegetables, soy, and fish, which is good for heart health, and lower in added sugar and saturated fats, and includes fermented foods, so it supports gut health. But sodium can be high with the soy sauce, the pickled foods, and some versions may lack calcium or vitamin D since dairy is minimal. The Mediterranean diet, there's a lot of strong evidence that supports it, reducing heart disease, diabetes risk, and includes a lot of omega-3s and polyphenols that are anti-inflammatory, and it encourages social meals and mindful eating. However, these ingredients that compose of the Mediterranean diet are often pricey here. And if you're on a stricter blood sugar management, these are not very carb-friendly diets. And wine is like often overemphasized in this diet. Like you hear many things talking about how red wine could really help and all the antioxidants in the red wine. But honestly, that is overemphasized and not the hugest part of the Mediterranean diet. For the vegan and vegetarian diets, high in fiber, antioxidants with a lot of plant diversity, which equals great gut and heart health, and lower in saturated fats. However, they can lack the essential vitamins we get from meat, proteins such as vitamin B12, iron, and omega-3s if it's not carefully managed. And lastly, the keto high protein diet, which can support fast weight loss and appetite control and really helps those with epilepsy and other diseases. However, it is very restrictive. It's really hard to sustain long term, and it has low in fiber since you're cutting out a lot of the fruits and vegetables that actually contain carbohydrates, and the high fats and the nutrient gaps make it a very risky diet. And when we look at these evidence-based diet patterns, you can see some common things emerge. They're all plant-forward, rich in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and not a lot of processed and saturated fats. And beyond food choices, Mediterranean Asian diet patterns often also emphasize the lifestyle part, which is social eating, meal structure, mindful lifestyle habits, which likely add to their health benefits. So while there might not be a single perfect diet, and no single diet that we talked about is perfect, but these patterns kind of highlight principles that can guide healthy eating for life. And another important consideration to think about when we talk about healthy eating is, as we mentioned, it looks different for everyone and across different cultures. For example, it's unrealistic to tell someone to just stop eating rice or stop eating a tortilla, even if it is more processed or if it includes more saturated, like even if it includes less fibers, but because this isn't realistic. These are staples of their cultures and daily meals. Restricting them completely can actually feel exclusionary and isn't necessary for health. Instead, the focus should be on balance, to include a variety of foods from different groups, the preparation, like the cooking methods, for example, steaming versus deep frying or stir frying instead of pan frying or like oil frying. And portions control is important too. And everything in moderation. It's not like you should cut out all candies in your life forever or never touch a chocolate bar again. And this is the approach that can help people honor their traditions while still supporting their lifelong health. And so, based on what we've talked about today, in planning your own perfect diet now, what were some of the things that you would include?
You can either unmute or put it in the chat.
Exercise. Yeah, fish. Definitely something more overlooked here in the Western diet. More fish, yeah. Lentils.
Those are all great suggestions and ideas. Hopefully, you'll take some away from today. So, one of the resources that is available to you and to anyone, and it comes out of our government, is My Plate. It used to be Choose My Plate. Now they're just going by My Plate. This replaced the food pyramid a number of years back because it was thought people didn't understand the food pyramid. And the idea here is that you should have pretty equal portions of different foods in and on your plate. And if you're not consuming milk, dairy would be either soy milk or nut milk or an alternative to that. And next slide. If you go to myplate.gov, they've really enhanced the resources that they have here. You can actually set your own goals. It's in the kind of to the right. If you set up an account in myplate.gov, you can put in your height, weight, your activity level, and your age, and it will tell you servings of the different food groups that would be important for you to consume in a day. They've got tips, they've got recipes, and it will give you your plan. So this is a great resource if this would be helpful to you to just think about eating healthy and making those choices. Next slide.
And nutrition matters more than just numbers on a scale. It's actually the foundation to both like long-term health and everyday life. For health, the foods we eat provide essential nutrients that our bodies need to grow, repair, and to just get through everyday tasks. They also help prevent chronic diseases that we talked about, the silent ones like heart disease, diabetes, and certain cancers. And they also support mental health, memory, and mood. For daily life, good nutrition translate into more energy and focus, stronger immunity, better recovery from exercise or even illness, and overall quality of life increase. And essentially, what you eat every day doesn't just affect your future health, it affects how you function and feel right now. And now let's step back and look at the big picture. Diet is actually one of the most powerful lifestyle factors we have when it comes to influencing our health outcomes, and sometimes even more than exercise or supplements. But here's the encouraging part. You don't need to be perfect. Small, consistent choices are key, like adding an extra serving of vegetables, swapping out a sugary drink for water, or just choosing a whole grain. All of these small steps add up over the long term to make a big major change to your health. And don't worry, it's never too early to start building healthy habits, especially for the kids. First, children learn what's normal, healthy eating by watching adults. You are their model. If they see a balanced meal, variety, and healthy choices, when they grow up, they're more likely to adopt those habits for themselves. And second, good nutrition is crucial for growing bodies and brains. Proper nutrients help support brain development, physical growth, and learning. So setting the stage early is crucial for lifelong health. And finally, teaching children about food awareness. So they're likely to be influenced by those marketing ads, and learning how to read nutrition labels and understanding how they work and the serving sizes really helps them to grow up and make more informed choices rather than following trends or cravings. But don't worry for the adults, it's also not too late to still start. You can still see major benefits at any age. A good starting point is an annual medical visit. This gives you a snapshot of your health and helps you identify areas to improve. For example, a lipid panel, a blood sugar, blood pressure test to see and test for those silent diseases you might not feel the symptoms for. Vitamin D levels actually is something that's often overlooked, but it's important for immunity and bone health. Colonoscopies, now starting at the age of 45, is everyone can get a colonoscopy, and it's to prevent colon cancer and through early detection. And colon cancer is actually one of the rising number, like the most common found cancers nowadays. And for the ladies, mammograms starting at age 40 to test for breast cancer. And lastly, looking at your height, weight, BMI, and waist circumference. And these are not like tell-all signs, but they're for reference. So if you're 35 inches or above or 40 inches and above for men, you might want to look at your diet. And of course, what plays a huge role in all of these is diet. And what you eat directly affects your lab results, blood pressures, and any long-term disease risks. And even small dietary changes combined with regular checkups can make a big difference over time in your adult life.
So the simple answer to our question of what is the best diet is a diet that you can follow for a lifetime and that meets your own particular needs. Next slide. So building a diet for a lifetime, these are just tips that you may want to think about and consider. We mentioned moderation. I teach kids, I have a group through Children's Hospital that I run, and these are kids that carry extra weight. I teach them that there are no bad foods. Kids want to label foods bad. Oh, that's a bad food. And not a good idea, because then it becomes a food that you want more often if you consider it bad. So it's about moderation. Eating foods from the food groups, looking at my plate. Watching snacking and beverages can add up so fast with extra calories. Limiting the ingredients, making things fresh at home, decreasing your eating out and processed foods. Fiber intake continues to be a nutrient that we are all not doing well with, and lots of reasons to increase fiber in our diet. Protein and fats, we're waiting for an article to come out from the school from Walter Longo, who his career is dedicated to the fasting mimicking diet. And he has looked at data related to protein, and protein ages our body. High levels of protein, and I've met those individuals that are heavy meat eaters, can speed up your body's aging process. So we need to watch our protein and not go overboard. Sleep, stress reduction, exercise, small goals that you can build on. Start with something small that you're going to do for a day or for a week, and gradually build up from there. I'm not a big believer in the scale. I don't think that the scale should be the reason we eat what we eat or do what we do. I think your annual medical visit, family history of diseases, how you feel in general, should be your focus, not what a scale says. Next slide. So practical takeaways, think about eating the rainbow, build your habits early, especially if you have kids, take small steps towards those changes that you want to see, and adapt your nutrition to your culture, to your lifestyle, and to your health needs. Next slide. I was asked to, sorry, we have a typo in program. I was asked to just briefly mention what we're doing at USC. I am a co-lead for the subcommittee looking at nutrition. It's called Eat Well on the USC campus. It's one of many committees. Next slide. And this program is for faculty and staff, and we're trying in multiple areas to improve health of our employees. And for our nutrition, we've got a whole lot of projects. I'm not going to go into detail. The one I will mention, if you search for Eat Well USC, you'll be able to get to this. I have students that help create 100 cooking recipe video demonstrations. That one I would really highlight. It's open to anyone. It's not password protected. And if you want to try a new recipe, you could go there. Next slide. We also do monthly, we call them Eat Well Bites. And each month we have a half an hour at lunchtime little presentation that we do. And they're very well received, just to get people, as we're doing today with you, thinking about healthy choices, things that you might want to do. Next slide. So now we're to questions, and I know there were a number of questions in the chat, and we can definitely go back through. I don't know if you are guiding us through that, or you want us just to look back through.
I think you can go and take a look at it. And
Okay.
then,
I'm glad for the student that asked about folic acid. It is involved in formation of the neural tube. Here's the problem with the risk for spina bifida. The neural tube is formed within the first trimester, often when women don't even know that they're pregnant. And folate as a B vitamin is very important for that neural tube development. And good sources of folate, beans and lentils, tomatoes, the foods that if you're eating an ultra processed food diet, you're not getting good folate. And pregnant women are asked to up their folate. Folic acid is the synthetic form of folate, so it needs to be broken down from folic acid by the body. You need those enzymes to break it down and metabolize and make it bioactive. So it's one, we now add it to all grains. It is because of spina bifida that the federal government decided that they would require companies to add folic acid to pasta and breads and things like that. Somebody asked about USDA recommendations changing with the current policies. I haven't heard anything about that. I think it will take time if they really do make major changes. Under Obama administration, they really tried to push down the salt in foods that people were eating because of hypertension. It is one of the easiest ways to deal with someone that's got high blood pressure. And under the current administration, I know there's been talk of bumping that back up, the amount of sodium that can be served in school lunches and things like that. With the keto diet, it is amazing. We don't know why people, when they follow this keto diet, strict control of carbohydrate intake, why there's less seizure activity. If you're curious about this, look for the Charlie Foundation. It was a fella in Hollywood who revived the keto diet, and it was because of his son. And his son was on so many different medications for seizures, and they were at the end of the rope and wanted to just keep trying things. And their son, Charlie, who's an adult now, does not take medication for whatever it was that helped him. It treated his seizures. And I don't know whether he still is on a keto diet or has been more liberal with his diet, but it's pretty miraculous what that diet has done for people with epilepsy. Waist circumference. Yeah, definitely waist circumference would be different. And like BMI, it's just a screening indicator. When you carry more fat within your abdominal area, your risk for things like diabetes and heart disease go up. Your body's ability to get insulin to the sugar in your diet and into the cells with central obesity can be a problem. Same with heart disease. You've got more fat in the body within the heart area and the central area. So using that again as a screening tool, not just looking at BMI, maybe looking at what somebody's waist circumference. Those are pretty liberal measures, even for someone with a bit bigger body frame. And I'm sure they took that into account. I think I went through those questions very quickly. Cooked or raw tomatoes? Oh, I love talking about tomatoes and what's the nutrient in tomatoes that when you cook it, it's more bioavailable? I'm totally blanking. And it's for men. The tomatoes are a good food for the prostate. I can't remember. What's interesting with raw versus cooked, for many of the vegetables, steaming, slightly cooking vegetables can release some of those phytonutrients that you don't necessarily get in the raw form. You're still going to get nutrients. Some you may get a little bit more, but I think it comes down to how many tomatoes do you eat and whether you're getting enough. And I wouldn't rely just on tomatoes for folate. All of the enriched cereals, grains, etc., pasta have folic acid added to them. So unbeknownst to you, you're getting folic acid from some of those foods that you're already eating. All right, silent diseases. When should we visit? Oh, I love that question. Without wasting money. So here's what I will say, and I'm always happy to use myself as an example. My dad was 56. He died from type 2 diabetes, heart disease. He was a smoker. He had stress in his life. 56 years old, third heart attack. That was his third heart attack. I had two grandparents that had type 2 diabetes and heart disease. Both died of that. So when I was in my 20s, I asked my doctor if they could look at my blood sugar level, if they could look at a lipid profile because of the family history. And my sugars were good, but my cholesterol was high. My lipid panel wasn't too bad. I generally have had that looked at least every year, every other year when I go to the doctor. I now have prediabetes, shock. It wasn't surprising to me. I know I'm taking statins for cardiovascular disease risk, but I'm doing that as a preventive. I welcome doing that because the risk is there for me to die from those diseases. People in my family died from those diseases. And I eat really healthy. I tried first with diet to see if I could lower my cholesterol, and that helped. And I tried exercising, but for me, all those things still aren't enough. So we all should go to the doctor at least annually. Get your blood pressure checked. That's an easy one. I'm not saying that you need to have blood work done every single year, but collect that information. Talk to your family about your family history. Go for your annual physical. Even if you feel healthy, go for your annual physical. So, yeah, great questions. Cow's milk, good or bad? I love this question. There was a great article that came out of Harvard, and I share it with students that took a really deep dive. They did a systematic review looking at, is milk good or bad? And should I drink skim milk, 1% whole milk? And here's the uptick of that article, is that milk is not bad. We don't really need to be doing the low fat or the skim, especially if you're not having milk that often, unless it's a weight issue where you're trying to watch your calories. What came out of that is that drinking more milk doesn't give you stronger bones. And there's a lot of other foods that have calcium that can help us with our bones. Broccoli is a good one. Almonds are a good one. So if you like milk, I would not give it up. And it's a personal choice. I kind of got situated with 1% or 2%. Occasionally I'll drink whole milk. It doesn't taste the same to me because I've been too many years on the 1%, 2%. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. These are all great questions. Oh, fasting. I'm loving that you're asking this. Occasional fasting provide any health benefits? So I also am a fan of, and this has to do with your body's physiology and what goes on inside and why we sleep. I'm a fan of doing a 12-hour fast. If all else is good for you and you're able to do an 8 or a 10 or a 14 or even a 16-hour fast, and I have met people that eat breakfast, lunch, dinner within a short time period, your body needs to recover at night. That's why we sleep, for all other processes, food included. And if we give our body a break, if you want to do more reading, look at Walter Longo, has some books that he's written. Again, I said his life has been devoted to looking at the role of fasting and the aging process. He's a biologist by training. And he would be the first to tell you that his work that he's doing with individuals with cancer, he is putting them on his fasting mimicking diet for, it's Walter Longo with a V, like Walter, but a V for Walter. He puts individuals on fasting mimicking diet for a number of days prior to chemotherapy. And for individuals that eat food 24/7, if you think about the cells in your body, if you are continually feeding the cells in your body, the old cells that need to die and go away, they're not going away. And that's cancer, is abnormal growth of bad cells. And so what he has found with his cancer studies is he is seeing great improved outcomes for individuals that do that fasting, allow those cells to have some death happening, and then they get hit with chemotherapy, those cells that are remaining. So I think, from him and others that are looking at fasting and what goes on inside the body, I think we will continue to hear more, but it's easy. Just stop eating at 6 or 7 at night and don't have that snack. Have a cup of green tea. Have, something else that's soothing to you, and wait till the next morning to eat again. I think there may be some evidence to say that could be a good thing. And spices. Definitely spices. There have been studies on spices like turmeric, cinnamon for diabetes. However, you need to take that with a grain of salt. A lot of those studies have looked at putting turmeric or cinnamon in a capsule or several capsules. to get the amount that really is going to have an influence. We've had spices and seasonings in culture in our diet for thousands of years. Certainly there is no wrong in adding spices. Can adding cinnamon to all of your foods help with blood sugar levels? Maybe a tiny bit, but the amount of cinnamon one may need to really affect blood sugar may be more than what you would be sprinkling on your food. So do what tastes good. If you like it, add it.
B12 deficiency in people who use antidepressants, especially in the elderly, is very common.
Yeah. Somebody asked about my take on supplements, food. Let me do the food with, with foods with 9 essential amino acids. So my favorite in that category is cashews. Is it cashews? No, it's not almonds. There's a nut that the nut board has now said has the 9 essential amino acids. I want to say it's cashews. So definitely if cashews have the 9 essential, but the other food is quinoa. Quinoa has the 9 essential amino acids, but remember the complementary protein. So if you're eating a corn tortilla with beans, you're complementing the amino acids in the corn tortilla with the beans that you're consuming. So, make sure that you're doing those complementary grains with nuts, another complementary.
Walnuts have all the amino acids.
Oh, maybe it's walnuts that I'm thinking
Yes,
of. Yeah,
walnuts.
good for brain health. In terms of supplements, I love that question also. I am not a fan of taking supplement just for security, just in case. If you are eating a variety of foods, a variety of colors, and whole grains, and lentils and beans, and chicken and fish, I'm not a fan of supplements. If you went to your physician, I suggest that all should be checked for vitamin D levels. Vitamin D is a nutrient that we've done more research in the past few years. And during COVID, we found how important vitamin D was for your immune system. And I take a vitamin D because I have osteoporosis, so it helps with that. But my D levels before I started taking supplements, I walk from my car to campus. I go for walks with my dog, but maybe it's just not enough D that I'm getting. I'm not a big milk drinker. I do drink it. Very few foods that are good sources of vitamin D. And for people that aren't milk drinkers, that's a significant source. Cereals are a source of vitamin D. Flaxseed, also for vitamin D. So yes, find out whether you're deficient. For women, if you're feeling tired, have your iron levels checked. Maybe you need to take an iron supplement. If you are following a vegan diet long term, I definitely would have a conversation with my doctor about making sure that I was checking some of the vitamin minerals that can tend to be deficient for somebody long term on a vegan diet. So I think, definitely if you have either a disease condition, yeah.
Yogurt is a good source of vitamin D and can be taken by lactose intolerance people.
Some people can't tolerate yogurt. Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much. I don't want to keep people. We were supposed to be 4:30 to 5:30. Thank you so much. And
So if there are no further questions, it is my pleasure to thank Carin and Melissa for a wonderful, wonderful seminar, very informative health point of view seminar. And thank you very much once again.
Take care.
And
all right. Bye-bye.
Thank all the audience, and thanks, Veronica, for supervising the seminar. Thank you.
Thank you very
you.
much.
Thank you, Veronica. Thank you very much.
You. It was a very nice seminar. I feel like I learned a lot.
Yeah, actually, it showed only 20 people on the screen here, but I talked with Glendy and she had 45 students
Oh, okay.
sitting in front of her. So there are at least 65 to 70 people listening.
Oh, great. That's great. Yeah, I saw the 21. So,
Yeah.
and then she had the students, so that's wonderful.
Yeah, because among the 100 and odd registered, about 60 or 65 of them were students. But they registered independently, but actually they are with with their teachers.
Yeah.
So they don't show up in numbers here, but they are there.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Good.
And thank you very much. In spite of your very busy schedule and all that, you had to run and start the seminar. And
Yeah,
thank you very much.
yeah. Oh, I should stop it.